It takes place in 1942. Captured Jews, including Gillis Creamier, are transported in a truck. A guy offers him a book in exchange for a sandwich. The book was written in Farsi. Soon the Nazi soldiers led the Jews out of the truck, not allowing them to take their luggage. They were immediately deprived of their lives. Gillis pretended to be lifeless, but the soldier quickly discerned his deception. Gillis began to convince him that he was not a Jew, but a Persian. The soldiers lowered their weapons. Officer Koch is just looking for a Persian and is willing to pay. To prove the truth of his words, Gillis showed the soldiers the book in Farsi. He was returned to the truck. Meanwhile, Hauptsturmführer Klaus Koch reprimands Helferin Elise Strumpf for her incomprehensible handwriting. Hearing scolding from behind the door, the soldiers realized that the officer is in a bad mood, but they took Gillis to him anyway, saying that he is Persian. As proof, Klaus was given the book. Gillis, who can speak German, lied that his father was Persian and his mother Belgian. The Hauptsturmführer ordered the soldiers to wait in the corridor. The book had the name Riazwa written on it, and Klaus assumed that was the prisoner's name. He told Gillis to say a few words in Farsi and to read a passage from the book. Gillis said he could neither read nor write in Farsi, but only speak. He had to make up words as he go along and speak an invented language in order to mislead the officer and save his life. Klaus bought into the deception. He told Gillis that from tomorrow he would work in the kitchen and help feed the prisoners. And after work Gillis would have to teach Klaus the Farsi language. Now the Hauptsturmführer ordered that the new prisoner be taken to the barracks. Outside, soldiers lined up Jews and assigned them to barracks. The kitchen staff was told the rules to be strictly followed. Stealing food and spoiling inventory were punished very severely. Gillis along with the other Jews set to work. Rottenführer Max invited Helferin Elise Strumpf to tonight's dance, organized especially for the soldiers, but she declined. Max decided to share his misgivings about Riazwa. He doesn't believe the guy is Persian. Meanwhile, Gillis is nervous about his upcoming Farsi lessons. He mentally thinks of different words so that he won't be caught off guard later, because his life depends on it. Klaus talked about his plans to move to Tehran after the war and open a restaurant with German cuisine. Klaus used to be a chef, the occupation he enjoys very much. Now he plans to learn 4 Farsi words a day. That way he can learn more than 2,000 words in a year. The first lesson began. Gillis recalled the words he had made up beforehand, and Klaus wrote everything down in a notebook. The Hauptsturmführer did not suspect deception. At night Gillis continued to make up different words, and lied to the warden that he was praying. Klaus was learning what he thought was the Farsi language. Max came to him and claimed that the prisoner who introduced himself as Riazwa is in fact not Persian but Jewish. However, Klaus finds these concerns ridiculous, because a Jew in his opinion could not fool a Nazi officer with impunity. Klaus decided to remove Elise from her duties. Now the Persian would be in charge of prisoner records instead of her. She did not like it very much, and she took her anger out on the cook. Klaus called Gillis to him and this time told him to translate 40 words into Farsi. For Gillis this was a problem. He does not have a pencil to write, so he will have to invent and memorize 40 new words. During lunch, Max sat down with an upset Elise, who is very unhappy that she was replaced by Riazwa. Max is also interested in getting rid of the pseudo-Persian. When Gillis took out the trash, Max wanted to seize the moment to get rid of him, but Gillis managed to escape. However, some man pointed a gun at him. He advised him to go back because he would be caught and punished anyway. Gillis admitted to the stranger that he was deceiving a Nazi officer and teaching him an invented language. It's not hard to make up words, it's much harder to remember them. And there are more of them every day. The soldiers are already searching for the fugitive. On the stranger's advice, Gillis returned, saying that he took out the garbage. Later, Klaus told him to write the names of the new prisoners into the registry in neat handwriting. Now Gillis had a simple pencil at his disposal. Having quickly completed the task, he used the names to compose those 40 words, ostensibly in Farsi. Klaus was very pleased with the work he had done. Now Gillis was not afraid to forget the words, because he used the constituent parts of the names from the list and could peek at any time. Klaus still did not suspect deception. During the day, Gillis used to feed the prisoners. Now he knew the names of each of them. Before going to bed, Klaus memorized the words, certain that it were Farsi. One day the commandant summoned him and asked how his progress in learning Persian was going. 6 months had passed, and in that time Klaus had learned 570 words. The commandant seemed suspicious that Klaus is interested in such an exotic language. Klaus assured him that he had a brother living in Tehran, whom he planned to move in with after the war. The commandant ordered him to prepare food for 30 people for an upcoming picnic. While Gillis was cooking, Klaus suddenly asked him how to pronounce the word love in Farsi. Gillis blurted out the first thing that came into his head. Klaus confessed that someday, in peacetime, he dreams of starting a family. A picnic was organized for the officers. Gillis was also present and was in charge of serving food to everyone. Elise confessed to Max that she is in love with the commandant, but he only took advantage of her and dumped. Suddenly Klaus asked Gillis how to pronounce the word tree in Farsi. Gillis inadvertently said a word he had used before. Suspecting deception, Klaus hit him. Gillis tried to justify himself by saying that it was just consonant words, but Klaus no longer believed him. In the evening, the commandant decided to take a picture together so that after the war was won, it would become historic. Later, Klaus told Max that he no longer needed the Persian, so he should be sent to the quarry. At the quarry, the prisoners were forced to toil until they were exhausted. The warden was Max, who did not spare Gillis. After the shift, he spied on Elise, whom he had been dreaming of for a long time. He wants to ask her to the disco and asks a coworker to fill in for him on duty tomorrow. Gillis ran out of strength and collapsed. The warder ordered the soldiers to take him back to the barracks. In the evening, Elise was getting ready for the disco. Max was already waiting for her and gave her a present. They were watched by Helfer and Jana Kraus, who was unrequitedly in love with Max. In a feverish state, Gillis mumbled words in an imaginary language. This was reported to Klaus, who was able to translate the words. Apparently Gillis was calling for his mother and wanted to go home. This was proof that he is Persian. Klaus ordered the soldiers to take Gillis to the infirmary. Soon Gillis regained consciousness. The doctor said that Klaus ordered the nursing staff to take good care of him. When Gillis got better, their lessons continued. Klaus was sorry for what he had done to his teacher at the time. As a sign of apology, he gave him his clothes. Elise continued to flirt with Max, saying obscene things about the commandant. Jana couldn't bear to watch this. She decided to report to the Hauptsturmführer that Helfer and Elise was divulging personal inappropriate information about the officer. Klaus was amused by this. The prisoners were to be shipped out tomorrow, so he asked the commandant for permission to keep the Persian here. The commandant told Klaus that he had received a denunciation on him. Some are convinced that he is hiding a Jew who is pretending to be a Persian. There are other unseemly rumors about them. Klaus immediately realized that Elise had written the denunciation, so he decided to take advantage of the obscene information about the commandant he had received from Jana. This gossip is also spread by Elise. The commandant had to let the Persian stay here. One day Gillis suggested that he talk to each other in Farsi. Klaus talked about his mother, who had passed away when he was 3 years old. At the end of the lesson, Klaus announced to Gillis that he would be sent to work on the farm for a few days. The other prisoners would be taken to Poland. In the morning, when Gillis was taken away, he saw the others being sent to certain doom. He worked on the farm all day, and fell asleep in the hayloft in the evening. Elise was returned to her former duties, but she was doing very poorly. Klaus remained very dissatisfied. The next day the commandant paid a visit to the canteen because Jana Kraus had petitioned for a transfer. However, instead of her the commandant decided to send Elise, who had been spreading rumors about him, to another camp. Gillis was returned to the camp. Max let him know that he knew the truth about his Jewish origins. Klaus was now doing a census of the prisoners on his own. During the feeding, Gillis asked the names of each prisoner and made up new words from the syllables. In the evenings the lessons continued. Klaus was learning new words. He found the Farsi language very beautiful. In the evening in the barracks, the new prisoners, Jacob and his mute brother, asked Gillis why he went to the Hauptsturmführer every night after work. He said he was only teaching him Persian. Winter came, and the prisoners suffered from the cold. Working in the canteen, Gillis watched their torment through the window. Later, Klaus read to him a poem in Farsi of his own composition. The officer asked Gillis to call him by his name and gave him a hearty meal. He also gave him stew and bread and allowed him to take it to the barracks to the other prisoners. Gillis shared the food with Jacob and his wounded brother. During the night, Jacob confessed that the main goal of his life is to bring the brother home, for he had made a promise to their mother. In the morning the warden sent the prisoners to work. In the evening a new group of prisoners was brought in. Among them Max found a real Persian. When Gillis heard about this, he was very frightened. Max dragged him to the barracks, but he was too late, because the Persian no longer showed any signs of life. Angered, Max attacked Gillis, thinking it was his doing. But suddenly Jacob confessed that he had done it. He paid for it with his life. At dinner, the commandant announced that because the enemy had bombed their railroad, the prisoners would have to walk tomorrow. A drunken Klaus came into his office and told Gillis that he was sorry that the other Persian had died. If things had turned out differently, the three of them could have talked in Farsi. Klaus also confessed that he and his brother are in a quarrel. The brother has not spoken to him since he joined the party in the SS. The brother is now in Tehran. At night, Gillis could not sleep. In the afternoon, a new batch of prisoners was being sent, who had to walk on foot in the cold. At dinner, one of the officers told Klaus that he had just seen the Persian on a prisoner shipment. At first, Klaus thought it was a mistake, but then he got worried and ran to check. He did find Gillis among the other prisoners and took him with him, despite the protests of another officer. It turns out that Gillis had done all this on purpose, sending the mute Italian to the farm in his place. Klaus wonders why Gillis would risk his life for another man. At night, explosions rang out in the distance, crockery rattled. The commandant announced that they were put on high alert. They were retreating without resistance, because all the troops had been moved to the eastern front against the Red Army. The camp must be urgently cleared and the prisoners destroyed so that no evidence remains. The prisoners were locked in the barracks. Klaus wondered what he should do now. He changed his clothes, took the money and came to get Gillis, and then took him out of the barracks. Max noticed this and tried to stop the Hauptsturmführer, but did not have time. He reported to the commandant that the Hauptsturmführer had left the camp with one of the prisoners, contrary to orders. But the commandant was not concerned about that now. He was burning all the evidence of the atrocities they had committed here. Klaus and Gillis ran away together. Klaus took off his officer's uniform and said there was a small airfield not far from here. From there he could fly to Istanbul and then to Tehran. Gillis is now free. When Klaus arrived at the Persian embassy some time later, he realized with horror that he did not understand the Farsi language. He fell into madness. After the liberation of the territories by the Red Army, Gillis told Soviet officers about the horrors of the concentration camps. All the archives with lists of prisoners had been destroyed, but Gillis could name 2,840 names. When Gillis began to list them all, he could not hold back tears. The officers were stunned.